Republicans are coming unhinged right now, and I don't mean conservatives. I mean Republicans. And I mean, Advance Arkansas Institute has been attacked all week. I see now that Jason Tolbert. I was just looking at the Twitter. He's basically still at it. To me, it is just. It's ridiculous. Republicans are so the ones that want this private option so bad. They are in. I can't. It's just like the John McCain's and Lindsey Graham's. It really is. You see how they fight with the conservative movement and the things that they say, and it's getting ugly pretty quick, isn't it?
Yeah, my boss, Dan Greenberg, president of Advanced Arkansas Institute, was just on Little Rock Radio with Dave Ellswick, and a certain state senator who's a sponsor of this private option bill actually called into the program to rebut some of what Dan was saying about this private option plan, accused him of being dishonest, accused Christy Herrera and Ed Hazelmeyer of the Heritage Foundation that spoke at our town halls earlier this week of somehow using false information and misleading the people of Arkansas about this private option plan. Even just got to the point, the senator, of just raising his voice and just cutting off Dan and just really, just like you said, I mean, just really becoming unhinged. And it's just breathtaking to me that when you step back and look at this, these guys are so invested in this, and how we've gotten to this point of not only are we not opposing this Medicaid expansion and Obamacare implementation in the state, people are willing to go after other conservatives and conservative organizations. I mean, I don't mind saying, Paul, I work for AAI, and they sign my paychecks, but I will tell you, I work for them for a reason. It is because they are one of the most principled, one of the best conservative organizations in the state of Arkansas, in the country. And now we have so-called conservative legislators attacking Advanced Arkansas Institute because they're opposing this plan. The reality of politics in Arkansas has just been totally spun on its head, and I don't really know how we've gotten to this point. It just really makes you wonder what is in it for some of these guys and why they are so invested and so willing to attack one of the most principled organizations in the country over this.
I got a feeling it has to do with the lack of principle. I mean, I think you've got some Republicans down there who, if they were on the national scene, they might be a little bit more progressive. They might even be labeled as progressive Republicans. To think that you can take Obamacare and somehow make it your own, and, like I said last hour, you want to take a little bit of poison when you have the option to ingest none of it. And there's just so many consequences from this, Nick, and I'm not taking it personally. And I know I get really angry, but I'm really not. I know some of these guys, I'm going to agree with them on other issues. But you're right, politically are invested in this, and that's a very, very good word to use. But I don't understand how in my opinion, they don't want to debate. The senator that you were speaking of actually wants to come on my program, and I'm going to try to have him on sometime early next week. Of course, if they don't pass it, on Monday, I think I've got Tuesday open because I have a big thing all day on the show with Act for America. They're bringing a guy in, and they might vote on the appropriations on Monday. But like you said, when you have conservatives that are just acting so petty, they're unfollowing. You have Republicans unfollowing conservatives because they're really upset about the things that they're saying. They don't have anything to dispute it factually. They're just upset that somebody's putting that out there.
Well, and there may or may not be on Monday. I mean, I just heard Representative Alan Kerr, who represents part of Little Rock. He was on KRN right before Dan went on the air. Actually, while Dan was on the air, he called in, and he made the comment. He said, we may have a vote on Monday, but if Kathleen Sebelius says there's no plan, what do we have to vote on? And I don't know how much you covered this already in the show today, but the big news of the day that we've been covering at the ArkansasProject.com, it's been picked up by Forbes and Heartland Institute and a Fox News contributor on Twitter, and it's just really blowing up. I mean, this is the biggest news, and someone on Twitter just accused me of spinning this into news. This is not spin. This is news. Kathleen Sebelius is the single person in America that has the authority to say whether or not the Arkansas plan can work or not. And yet we have conservative legislators and a lot of legislators at the Capitol that are trying to rush into this plan. Well, if you didn't cover this earlier in your show, let me tell your listeners what the news is. Kathleen Sebelius told the House Ways and Means Committee this morning in Washington, told Representative Tim Griffin, she hasn't read the bill. She has not read the bill, and she has not approved the Arkansas plan. So while we've had conservative legislators and a couple of so-called conservative journalists attacking Advanced Arkansas Institute on Twitter all week because allegedly our expert from the Heritage Foundation, who I might remind you, Avic Roy just tweeted this from Forbes. He said, this guy, Ed Hazelmeyer from the Heritage Foundation, invented the idea of healthcare exchanges. Mm-hmm. And yet we have senators in Arkansas attacking him for not knowing what he's talking about because he hadn't read the most recent draft of their plan.
Oh, wow.
So now we have the HHS secretary saying that she hasn't read the plan and she hasn't approved the plan, and she assumes that her staff is in communication with the staff in Arkansas, but she doesn't know. But if we pass it, she will be more than happy to take a look at it. So the Arkansas legislature has been up to this point proceeding with this plan based on this so-called agreement between the state and Kathleen Sebelius, and now we find out, at least it appears, that there is no agreement. There's even legislators, sponsors of the bill now on Twitter saying that, well, they never said there was an agreement. They just, they never said that. Well, there's mounds of evidence from the media coverage in the last 6 weeks that speaks to the contrary. So this is very significant news. After the news broke this morning, we saw that the Speaker of the House moved the vote back to Monday. He said in his press release that it was to give members more time to go home and visit with their constituents. I don't question his honesty, but what I will say is that I think that may do more harm than good.
Yeah.
I think when a lot of these guys go home and talk to their constituents this weekend, they're not going to hear supportive comments.
Mm-hmm.
People, I can tell you, Paul, you know this because you've been talking to folks like I have. People are fired up. We did 5 events in 2 days earlier this week, all across the state. People don't want this. The people of Arkansas don't want this. The polls say it. The people are saying it. Social media is saying it. Now a bunch of legislators are starting to say it. And, it will be interesting. It's all I can say.
Yeah.
I didn't think, you and I talked last night. I didn't think they had the votes in the Senate last night. I guarantee you they don't have the votes in the Senate today.
Yeah. I hope they don't. I've been talking to senators, and I'm trying to whip up some votes. But you mentioned why Kathleen Sebelius, why this is such big news. We were all under the assumption that the plan was okay. That's what we were told. That's what media.
Sure.
Now the other side of that is liberals are saying, well, they just agreed on a new framework, and that we didn't have any specifics. That's not how it was sold to us at all. As a matter of fact, if you go back and you look at the press, do you honestly think Louisiana would have even considered this piece of legislation had they not believed it had already been approved by Sebelius? Do you think South Carolina would have even considered the Arkansas plan if they didn't believe it was approved by Kathleen Sebelius? So of course they thought that. And now the news now Louisiana and South Carolina have gone on to reject this plan even before Kathleen Sebelius has come out with her revelation that she'll decide on what's best for Arkansas after we pass the bill. Come on. And it's such a fallacy in my opinion also, Nick, because I listen to your town halls, and for them the argument that John Burris is going to give, which he's given on Twitter, is that if they don't approve it, there is no negotiation. We don't do it. It's over. That's what the bill says. And I really think you need to look at the Supreme Court statute, because it just says you got to give the states a choice, and once you accept, you are in that Medicaid contract, and they can come and it's just like Medicaid is now.
No, absolutely. And that is one thing that Ed Hazelmeyer hammered on at every one of our town hall meetings, and for some reason, some legislators seem to be unwilling to consider this. But Ed Hazelmeyer is one of the leading healthcare policy experts in the world. Not just in the state, not just in the country, in the world. He works for the Heritage Foundation, okay? This guy knows what he's talking about. And one of the things that he said at every town hall event we had is he compared the Medicaid expansion to the Hotel California. And the way he phrased it is, you can check out anytime you like but you can never leave. Because what the Supreme Court said is you can opt into Medicaid expansion, but according to Hazelmeyer, there is certainly some ambiguity in that language that he thinks and other healthcare policy experts think. A court may say, well, they gave you the option to check in, but they never gave you the option to check out. So you have to stay. And that's, I think we're essentially, if we go forward with this plan, it's going to turn into either a legal battle or just a really big fiscal mess for the state. Mm-hmm. And as far as, we never had an agreement, February 26th, Mike Beebe rode back into Little Rock on a white horse from Washington, D.C. to deliver the great glad tidings of what Kathleen Sebelius had told us on Medicaid expansion. And this quote from the Arkansas Times on February 26th, I don't have it in front of me, but I'll do the best I can to paraphrase it. He said, I think they pretty much have given us everything that we asked. Everything that we asked for. I mean, did Mike Beebe say the words, we have a deal? Not anywhere that I've seen reported, no. They gave us everything that we asked for. Those are Mike Beebe's words. February 26th, the day that the private option was announced. So, there's also comments in that same story from the Senate President, from the Speaker of the House. I mean, they were operating on this alleged agreement. And one of our criticisms, at the ArkansasProject.com and Advanced Arkansas Institute has been from the beginning that there wasn't anything in writing. And, all the legislators and pundits, at the Arkansas Times who are pushing for this big time, they want Obamacare all the way. But one of the arguments that they're making now is, well, we never said that there was a deal, and also, the legislation has a trigger. And it says that if the feds don't agree to this plan, then we're out. Mm. But, again, it goes back to what we were just talking about, Hotel California. Can you really opt out? And that is a question that we have to get an answer to before we sign on to this. I mean, the legislature owes at least that much to the people of Arkansas, don't you think?
Oh, wow, yes. Do they ever? I mean, not to mention, so many of these guys campaigned against Medicaid expansion or Obamacare in Arkansas, and now, I will say, what you're doing is working, Nick, because I saw a tweet from John Brummett that said at one time they had 74 yes votes for the private option in the House, and they only got 11 Republicans to vote with them yesterday. And so I think they definitely feel the pressure, and that is why, as I said at the beginning, Republicans who are for this are coming unhinged. They're getting very, very angry. I think some of them that want to have political futures beyond the state legislature are even more upset because they are so invested politically in this, and it's something that the state doesn't want to happen.
I think there's a lot of that. I think that, it's hard for me to judge anyone's motives, and I don't sit here and aspire to do that. But I do think that there are a lot of people that have a lot at stake here, if nothing else than just, their own reputations. Mm. There are people who have been getting a ton of positive press from places that they've never gotten it before. The Arkansas Times, John Brummett's blog, John Brummett's column, pretty much every newspaper in the state has been praising them and pushing them forward on this. I don't pretend to think that that's not a factor or that that's not flattering in some way to these legislators. But what I think they're starting to realize is that their constituents don't support this plan, and their friends at AFP, Advanced Arkansas Institute, a lot of these other conservative organizations, Heritage, Cato, that they're not behind this. And so I think they're starting to wake up and realize they're on the wrong side of this issue. And what I want to say and what I want to convey to these guys, we saw Representative Webster, the majority leader, take his name off as a co-sponsor. Not only did he take his name off as a co-sponsor on Tuesday, he went to the floor of the House yesterday and spoke against the bill. He gave a very passionate speech against the bill and has been rallying support against the bill. So, what we're seeing, I think, is conservatives are starting to wake up. It is working. We are getting through to them. Now, what is so important for us to do is to welcome them back. We don't need to hold this against them. We need to be willing to say, you know what, guys, you tried. You've been right on so many other issues. You've been right on voter ID. You've been right on all these other good government reforms, transparency reforms. Come back. We'll welcome you back. I don't think it doesn't do the conservative movement in Arkansas any good to say, no, you betrayed us and we're done with you. We're throwing you out. I think we've got to give these guys an opportunity to get back on the right side of this issue. Otherwise, I think the damage to the conservative movement in the state is going to be great.
I agree. They are embracing something that is a Democrat idea. You know what? I had never really thought about the flattering aspect, but I'm sure they are. I'm sure they like John Brummett. As a guy, as a nice person, but yet he's singing their praises. I mean, these guys are quickly becoming. If you look at the Arkansas Times and John Brummett's pieces, they're becoming the heroes of the left. And any time that happens from a conservative standpoint, not that it can never happen, but any time that happens, you at least need to pause and say, does this happen very often when conservatives are being principled? And really and truly, I put out a call to anybody listening who's a politician right now. I implore them to do the hard thing. And I think if you do the hard thing, and if you want to know what the hard thing is, because I know some of the politicians, Nick, would say, oh, it's so hard to go against my constituents. I for some reason, I think it's going to be a lot harder for you to vote against $2 billion to hospitals, the AARP. It's going to be harder for you to vote against giving a bunch of money to insurance companies. That's the hard thing. Oftentimes it has to do with money, and that's the right decision for Arkansans.
Absolutely. And I reiterate again that I think Representative Westerman just displayed terrific courage this week when he really, think about what he did. I mean, he was one of the early embracers of this. He got in there, he got in the numbers, he got in the actuary analysis. He worked on this plan with a lot of these other legislators. I think he really wanted it to work because I think he really cares about the state and he really wanted to reform Medicaid. But once he got into the dirty details, and I can't speak for him. I don't speak for him. But my opinion is, he saw the reality of the situation, which is we can't fix Medicaid by adding 200,000+ people to a broken program. We've got to fix the program. And, this goes back to something that we talked about in our town hall meetings as well. If we had a favorable tax system, favorable tax code here in the state, if we had a favorable regulatory system, if we had a better standard of living, which comes from those two things, we wouldn't need to provide health insurance for 250,000 people. People could buy health insurance for themselves. We could have higher wages and, the rising tide lifts all boats. We say that a lot as conservatives, and I think sometimes we fail to translate that into real terms for people. And this is one of those times. I mean, this is the wrong approach to a real problem. We have a broken Medicaid system. We have people that are poor that need health care, but this is not the way to provide that to them. We need to give them better paying jobs, let them keep more of their money so they can buy their own health insurance, and get the government off their backs. I think those are the real solutions here.
Last question or point, and then you can have the last word. So you're at the Advanced Arkansas Institute Town Hall for Legislators, and I understand. I understand it was, maybe a less than congenial experience, according to one of the speakers. It wasn't. See, it's not Heritage; it's the other group that I can never remember. But I just got to say, they thought you didn't. That you're Hazelmeyer didn't read the bill, and turns out he had read the bill. It just wasn't the current draft. So they got up at one point and walked out. Is that correct, Nick?
There were several that got up and left. There was one senator in particular that sort of raised his voice and made a big mention of the fact that Mr. Hazelmeyer had supposedly not read the bill, and as a result of that, was not qualified to speak about Medicaid expansion. Okay. I mean, Mr. Hazelmeyer, like I said earlier in this segment, is a world-renowned healthcare policy expert who has studied Medicaid expansion since the beginning of the Obamacare, since Obamacare was passed, before it was passed.
So to me, I wasn't there. To me, the whole thing sounds very contrived. We've obviously proven that they think it's a big deal if you haven't read the bill. Here with Hazelmeyer, he had read the bill, just not the current version. But I wonder if these same legislators that had such an issue with somebody not reading the bill now have the same issue now that Kathleen Sebelius has confessed in committee that she hasn't read the bill. I wonder if like Michael Cook over at Arkansas Talk Business, when he wrote a piece about it. I mean, I just wonder if he and other legislators are having the same outrage.
I mean, Mr. Cook has been surprisingly quiet today, and I haven't heard anything from any of these other legislators that have been sort of hassling us on Twitter and that were at the legislative luncheon. If folks want to see who they are, I'm not going to mention them on air, but they can go to thearkansasproject.com and read the most recent story about Kathleen Sebelius. And look, I named names. I mean, these guys have been hassling us for our expert, and Jason Tolbert has been hassling us for supposedly, our expert not reading the bill. And where are they on this? I mean,
yeah.
Kathleen Sebelius is the linchpin to this entire plan. I want to reiterate that. She is the person that decides whether or not this plan goes forward or not. The way Obamacare is written, it gives all the authority to Kathleen Sebelius.
A lot more valuable than Hazelmeyer. I mean, I like Hazelmeyer and the Heritage Foundation, but he doesn't have any actual power over what happens if we pass this bill.
She's the one that actually gets to decide. So you would think that perhaps she would take a look at it before Arkansas rushed into this thing. And I think this is a great point, and I know we've got to go, but I think this demonstrates the reasons that we can't trust the federal government, and that this is all a bait and switch. I called this a bait and switch. One of my first articles about this called it a bait and switch. We can't trust the federal government, even if they give us something in writing. Yeah. I don't think we can trust them.
Yeah.
So this demonstrates that, I think, better than anything, and that's why no one wants to talk about it.
All right, Nick. Well, we got to go, sir. The ArkansasProject.com is your site. You work for the Advanced Arkansas Institute. Tell Dan I said hi. He's welcome on the program anytime, by the way.
Absolutely. Will do. Always enjoy it. Thanks, Paul.
All right, folks. Got to go to break. Back in a minute.